My name's Tom Henderson. I'm the UWA Student Guild President for 2014, and it's my honour to welcome these fantastic panel members, former Defence Minister Stephen Smith, and graduate of UWA, Christie, and also a graduate here, I believe.
Yes.
And currently the executive in residence down at the UWA Business School, and currently working at the RBA.
On leave from the RBA.
On leave from the Reserve Bank of Australia. We have Rebecca Halse, who is an education graduate from UWA just recently, I believe.
2 years.
And the Vice-Chancellor, Paul Johnson. So what we'll start, I'll get Stephen Smith to introduce himself and talk about his experience while he was here at UWA and the connection he's formed with this university.
Well, thanks very much, Tom, and welcome everyone. Very pleased to see you all here at UWA on a Sunday afternoon. Well, I studied law and arts at the University of Western Australia. This will give away my age, which is regrettably on the public record anyway, but I finished school in 1972, and so my first year here was 1973, where I enrolled in the arts faculty. And I did that because in those days, to do law, which is what I wanted to do, you had to do what was called a prerequisite year. So you had to do a year in another faculty. So I got a university handbook. Don't tell the Vice-Chancellor this. I went to the back page. I got out a ruler and a blue pen, and I scored through everything that I didn't want to do, and I was left with arts and law, and because law required a prerequisite year, arts it was. So I did arts for a year, and then did 4 years of law. And in those days, you got 2 degrees, a Bachelor of Jurisprudence after 3 years and then an LLB after 4. The rationale for the Bachelor of Jurisprudence was for those people who wanted to utilise a law degree but not go on to practice. That didn't quite work, so that was in place from about 1972 to the 1990s, and then it was replaced with the double degree, which kids now do. When I finished my law degree, I did articles with a Perth law firm and then did restricted practice, and while I was doing that I finished off my arts degree part-time at the university, so I ended up with a BA and an LLB. And after practicing law in Perth for a couple of years, I went to the United Kingdom, went to London. I qualified to practice in the United Kingdom, but also decided rather than practice that I'd do a master's degree at the London University. So I did a master's degree in international law at the London School of Economics, and lectured and tutored law in London. I then came back and got distracted from the law and from academia for 4 decades. Went into the Federal Parliament. I was the member for Perth for 20 odd years, and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister for Defence, and retired. Announced my retirement in June of last year and finished up when the new government was sworn in, and the Vice-Chancellor and the Dean of Law then very kindly asked me to come back to the law school. So I'm now a Professor of International Law at the law school, primarily to deal with young Masters of International Law students. We'll start a Masters program next year, but also just to work generally within the law school with the public international law team on the basis of having a Master's degree of international law and 6 years as Foreign and Defence Minister. I may or may not have picked up something about international law along the way. So that's my sort of potted sketch. And I was very pleased to be asked to come back to the university. Over the years I'd kept in contact with the university and became an ambassador for the university when I was Foreign Minister, and also became involved in a big conference that the university puts on called the In the Zone Conference, which tries to attract people to the importance of Perth and the importance of Perth engaging with the emerging Asian and Indian economies around us. So I've always had a soft spot for the University of Western Australia, but also appreciated its quality. It's a very good university. It's in the G8 here, but it's in the top 100 universities throughout the world. For my sins, before I became a minister, I was a shadow minister for too long a period of time, and one of my portfolios was shadow minister for education in the last 12 months of the period that we were in opposition. And in that time, as shadow minister for education, I went to just about every university campus in the Commonwealth, and that was the first time I'd met the Vice-Chancellor wearing that cap before we poached him to come over here. The other advantage, not just its academic excellence and educational quality, is that I declare my conflict of interest being a UWA graduate, but there's no doubt in my mind that we are one of, if not the best, just general campuses in terms of a terrific place to get an education, a terrific place to spend a lot of your time. And if you get sick of the gardens in the campus, just walk across the road to Matilda Bay and enjoy one of the best parts of the Swan River. So there's an ambience about the place which is, in my view, one of, if not the best in the country. So from my perspective, I'm pleased to be back and helping out at the law school and at the university, but I always fondly remember my time here, going through the law school with my class. I keep in contact with a lot of the people who are at law school at my class, some of whom have gone on to become judges of the Supreme Court and various courts throughout the state's jurisdiction, or who have become Australian recognised barristers or solicitors. And one of the other things I do is I've gone back to my old law firm in town where I now sit on their independent advisory board. So for me it's been a very nice walk down memory lane. But none of that stuff would I be able to look back on with either pride or with satisfaction if I hadn't got a good grounding in the law when I first started, and I certainly got that at UWA. In my time here, you could mount a pretty respectable argument that getting an arts degree from the University of Western Australia sets you up for whatever you wanted to do. Arts graduates in those times, were offered jobs from the state and Commonwealth Public Service, are offered jobs from BHP or Woodside and the like. These days, in addition to setting you up for the professional qualifications in law, if that's the path you want to go down, an LLB or a JD as we move to the postgraduate degree over coming years, I think also sets you up for a good grounding in whatever you want to do. Law is a very good discipline. It teaches you how to think clearly. It teaches you the importance of logical and organised thought processes and clarity of expression. And I'm very pleased to be back helping out at the law school as a consequence of that. So if you're a young student in year 11 or 12 thinking about coming to a university, I can't recommend UWA highly enough. For parents, likewise. And I suppose the best thing that I can say to recommend people, parents and students, to think about UWA is that before I accepted the position at the law school as a professor of international law, I had to go to our son and our daughter, both of whom also are doing arts law at UWA, and ask them whether I had their permission to inveigle myself into their workspace. No veto was applied. I think the best expression is to say that the embarrassment was regarded as manageable. So the best recommendation I can give to parents about my experience and my appreciation of every opportunity that I got as a result of a UWA education is to say that I currently run into our son and our daughter when I'm traipsing around the law school discharging my obligations as a professor of law. So Tom, that's my story. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and please enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Stephen. Virginia, you've obviously done very, very well moving into the Reserve Bank of Australia and have returned to UWA as the, I can't remember the term, because it's one that's new to me and probably new to a lot of people, the executive in residence at the business school. Would you like to tell us about how you started here at UWA and why you decided to come and return?
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, let me say that my experience was quite different to Stephen's. So I studied Bachelor of Economics with honours here at UWA. And at the time, I remember, I wasn't particularly sure what to study as a student here at the university. except to say that I was quite interested in economics, I quite enjoyed it at school, and I was always interested in the current policy debate about the economy and what was happening in financial markets. So that was the decision around me coming to UWA to do economics, and it was a big decision, and I really wasn't sure whether it was the right one. But now looking back, sometimes I think that economics gets overlooked as a subject choice. And if you think about it, it's used every day, by governments and corporates and even individuals. And so what that means is that there's quite a wide choice of career options once you finish studying business school here at UWA. So you can move into public policy or financial markets or education or have jobs in the corporate sector. And I also think that the added benefit of studying at UWA today is that you don't need to choose that specialist field of study in your first year, which is something I had to think about. So the fact that you can choose subjects across different faculties, it gives you a bit of a taste for the sorts of subjects they are and whether you might prefer those. And I think that's a very sensible development by the university. So I chose a career in public policy because that's what I enjoyed the most. And actually that became apparent to me in the honours year. So the honours year brought everything together. It brought together my understanding of economics, and it started to become clearer that public policy is something I wanted to do as a profession. So I started at the Commonwealth Treasury in Canberra, and that was a fascinating role because there you have to formulate policy within this political environment. And then from there I moved to the Reserve Bank, and that's where I've spent most of my working career, both in Sydney, Head Office Sydney, and here in Perth. And in my most recent role at the RBA, so I headed the West Australian office for the past 9 years, we were responsible for reporting on conditions in WA, and the main way we were doing that was literally being on the ground and connecting with high-level corporates across different sectors of the economy to get a better idea of their decision-making. Because the decisions that they make today will affect or impact on economic outcomes tomorrow. And that information we analysed and sent back through to head office so that the RBA could make better informed decisions on interest rates. So I'm currently on leave from the bank, and in only 3 days' time, in fact, I have my own adventure. I'm relocating to Singapore. And so in between this period, between the bank and going to Singapore, I've had the privilege of working here at the university, and I have to say it's been a lot of fun. I've given a few guest lectures and speaker talks and met with students, and we've discussed career options. And the thing that I've been able to observe is that the quality of the students here is very high. The students question things, and that's always a very good sign. And in fact, historically, UWA Business School graduates have been very successful in their placement with the RBA graduate program. And I think that's saying something because it's quite competitive to get into the RBA. And so it's a real testament not only to the quality of the students here, but also to the quality of the teachings here at the university. And on the teaching side, I've observed that there are a number of people from quite diverse backgrounds. So they're from business schools abroad or interstate or locally, and even from the corporate sector. And the reason this is important is because I think it just adds to the depth of the teaching here. And even in my day, which was quite a few years ago, I was taught by a Chicago-trained economist who was a student of the Nobel Prize winner, Milton Friedman. And this particular professor of economics is still teaching at the business school today. And not because he has to, but because he thoroughly enjoys teaching bright students who want to learn, and they have this passion to learn economics. And I think that's fabulous that he's still here today. So I guess UWA prepared me well for my career, there's no doubt about that. It taught me the critical skills that were necessary to succeed and do well in my job. And I think you would expect that from an institution of this calibre. Students from this university achieve very highly academically, and that is to be expected. But UWA offers a bit more than this. And since I was a graduate, the university has made these very strong corporate connections. And that's important as a student because it keeps the university engaged with the latest developments and thinking in the corporate world. And the corporate world is looking to recruit from the university, so that connection is an important one. And the other thing I think that this university does very well is that it's devoted a lot of resources to establishing quality alumni networks. And I can speak about this confidently because I've been a member of the school's ambassadorial council. So we've had representatives from the business school and from the business sector, and we would meet fairly regularly. And UWA also has ambassadorial chapters in New York and London. These have been successful, and so it's established a new chapter in Singapore. And I'll certainly be activating the Singapore chapter once I move to Singapore. But these networking connections will be very important to you throughout your working life, whether you stay in Australia or whether you move offshore. And the networks are getting bigger and they're stronger. So it's really to your advantage as an alumni of this university. So look, that's all I wanted to say. I hope that gives you a bit of a taste for some of the offerings as I see it here at UWA. It is an absolutely beautiful campus. You have to make the most of that. And also remember to have some fun. You know, that's a big part of being a university student. So all the very best with those big decisions. Thank you.
Virginia, you spoke of UWA students being of such a high calibre and achieving so much. Rebecca, you were named the most outstanding student completing the graduate diploma in education. What about your experience here allowed you to achieve such high results?
I think starting out, obviously I didn't start with an education degree. That was something that I did as a postgraduate student. I took on the graduate diploma of education at UWA after having completed my full arts degree, but actually starting off doing law and law arts. And that decision was just something that I really didn't know, sort of like Virginia, come to the end of year 12 and you're still on the sort of pathway of having to decide what happens next year. And I think I was doing very well, so it was sort of the option, well, you're going to do law or medicine. And I didn't really want to do either, honestly. But I moved, I took up the law pathway and I followed that. And I did actually enjoy it for the first few years, but I found myself enjoying the arts side of my law arts degree a lot more. And I think I was in the history faculty and the classics and ancient history here at UWA. And I started to love learning, and I got into Uni Skills, which is a program here at UWA that helps with people that are at some kind of disadvantage or need a little bit of extra help through uni. And being a country student, that was something I could very much understand. And so I, at first, would be in the tutor groups, but then started off as a tutor in some of the first year law units, but then also in my passion, which is history and ancient history. And that started to foster a real love of learning, but also teaching for me, and sort of reminded me that teaching was always what I wanted to do, but I got told not to do. I got told you could be so much more than that. Law or medicine, I just remember being told. But I started to look into it a little bit more and look at what UWA offered, and I finished up my arts degree and decided that no, I wouldn't listen to my family, my friends, actually some of my lecturers, and I went and took on the postgrad education degree, and it was one of the most enjoyable years that I've had. I was immersed in I guess, educational theory, but very much it was a practical approach. So out in the classroom from pretty much day one, experiencing the challenges and the rewards that education brings. and being surrounded by very like-minded people. You know, we're all working towards a goal of quality education and making ourselves quality teachers, but coming from very diverse backgrounds. So you had country kids like me, and then people from all over the globe, really, and with really diverse backgrounds. So people straight from their first degree, wanting to then get that 1 year and go out into the classroom, but also a number of PhD students, masters, honours, that really were sort of at the same point as me, always wanted to teach, but continued and did what they were supposed to do at university, but then took that step and said, no, I want to get into the classroom. But business leaders as well, people that had been out and been working at the top of their field and decided that they wanted to sort of give back and take a classroom position in whatever discipline they had. But I found UWA in particular promoted the chance to really use our skills. So I had the knowledge that their graduates were at the top of their field and they could put them out in the classroom, and we weren't going to cause any psychological damage or anything to the children we were working with. But I found that that very rewarding, challenging of course, but rewarding, and I love my job. This is my second year teaching, and I think the reason why I won the UWA award and the WA award was simply because I love my job and because I find it so easy to go into a classroom every day with such beautiful kids. I'm at Shenton College, just here in Shenton Park, and work with some of the, not always the most academic kids, although they definitely are, but really altruistic, open to a challenge. And I think that secondary environment as a secondary teacher is just a wonderful one where we create a bit of an environment where you can challenge yourself and test ideas, and I really enjoy being part of that every day and seeing students, particularly those in year 11 and 12, starting to test out different ideas and different professions as well. And it's lovely to be able to create that safe environment where they can test those ideas. And then even coming to UWA with the way that things are working now, the decisions don't have to be made quite as fast as I found they needed to be. And so you can start off with an undergraduate and take some engineering, take some Latin, I recommend it, and test out those ideas and then decide, do a postgraduate in education, because we need quality teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Paul Johnson, Professor Paul Johnson is the head of the university here, both the principal academic officer and the CEO, if you will, and joined the university in 2012 and has instituted a large amount of change here at the university. So, Paul, if you were a prospective student just coming out of Year 12, what would it be about UWA that why you would choose UWA?
I guess it depends what you want to do as a Year 12 student. So, if you want to change the world and change yourself at the same time, then I think this is a great place to come. Universities need to be in the vanguard of ideas, of developing new ideas and of experimentation. New ideas have to come from somewhere in society, and universities are kind of ideas factories. So that's part of the role of the university, and so we want students who also want to make their impact on society. Students who want to pursue a big goal, and then as they pursue it, develop their career. And there's an interesting commonality amongst the things that Rebecca, Virginia and Stephen have said, and that's about about the difference between seeing university as a path to a job and seeing it as a pathway to a career. Those are very different things. Many universities and TAFEs and other training institutions can give you a pathway to a job. A job is just the starting point of a career. And the people who make really important and interesting careers are those who enter their job with a capacity to think and imagine and develop new ideas. Because in the end, what employers are looking for are graduates who can address complex problems and work in an area of ambiguity to move on the business, the school, the government ministry and portfolio, whatever it is they're focusing on. If you're just trained to solve a problem, then you probably won't have a long career, because yesterday's problems have already been solved and today's problems will be solved soon. What employers are looking for are people who have the imagination to focus on new problems, the issues that we haven't yet thought about. Almost anything that people today learn in senior high school and in universities will have been superseded in 10 years' time. Knowledge is being developed, skills, technology at an ever increasing pace. So the key attribute of any study at this university is that you develop an ability to think, to analyse, to formulate questions, to address these complex, these wicked problems that we face in the world. And if you can do that, and if that's the sort of person you are as a year 12 student, then I think this is probably the right university for you to come to.
Well, just before we get into the question and answer, any of those of you that have a particular question for any of our panel members, I share a unique quality on this panel that I'm the only one that hasn't graduated with a degree yet. And so my view of this university is very current, despite having been here for quite a long time. I started way back in 2008, having come from Shenton College, being my local school, with a lot of fantastic teachers. And my decision-making process to come to UWA was the fact that it was 5 minutes away, and I could ride my bike, which was nice. But it wasn't until I got here, having chosen to do engineering commerce double degree, that the university opened my eyes to the possibilities that are out there, especially coming out of year 12. I just had made a conscious decision in first and second year that I was going to get in and get out very, very quickly. I wanted to cash in my engineering job and head up north and earn the big money. But it wasn't until I got involved in the student experience and the campus culture that UWA has probably the best in Australia, that I realised there is so much more. And being involved in student societies and the guild, which I now head up, and all of the fantastic clubs ranging from the anime society through to zoology club, that this university is not just about what happens in the classroom, but what happens outside and the interactions and the friends you make while you're here. And I get asked quite a lot. I have a younger brother who's in year 11 at Shenton as well, and he's busy going through this same decision-making process about where he wants to go. And he always asks, why should I go to UWA? And despite being a fantastic, obviously the location is beautiful, but the biggest thing that I tell him is UWA is a place that teaches you how to learn. And while that is quite a foreign concept, learning how to learn seems backward. The university here gives you the skills to take not just your area of expertise that you may specialise in, be it law, be it education, be it economics, but allows you to go out into the world, challenge those ideas and learn more about the world and continue to take in knowledge and experience and further yourself as you move out into the real world. So that ends the formal, discussion about our experiences here at UWA. Does anyone have any questions they might like to ask our very talented panel? There's microphones around if you'd like to ask. I'd like to ask you a question, Stephen.
Yeah.
What made you? What about your UWA experience and degree allowed you to perform at such a high level in the federal political environment?
Well, in a sense, it's what you've and also Paul referred to. It's the discipline of learning. When I started law, and I always had in the back of my mind that I was interested in politics and parliament and public policy and public life. So there was always in the back of my mind the notion that this is something that I would like to pursue. But I always thought it was important to get yourself a professional experience beforehand, on the basis that if you went into politics and it didn't quite work out, or you went into politics or tried to go into politics and that failed, that you had something else to fall back on. So, and as a consequence, I suppose, of being interested in public policy and public life and parliament and current affairs and history of politics, law was a natural thing for me to also be attracted to. So the discipline of learning, the discipline of logical thought, hard work as well. Often you see things and people say, that's inspiring. I regret to advise that most of it is 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. The best spontaneous speeches and interjections in the Parliament have always been well practiced and tried and tested. So the discipline of learning, really, which was one of the points that was made earlier. You know, teaching yourself how to think, teaching yourself how to apply logical thought processes, teaching yourself how to make a judgment between on-balance issues, because lots of things in life are black and white, but many things are grey, where you've got to make a balance of judgment decision. And the skills that I picked up here and then honed throughout my professional career, I think always held me in good stead. Yeah, and also, if you get taught about the discipline of learning, you always learn new things. Paul and I were at a lecture that the former Justice of the High Court, Michael Kirby, gave a week or two ago. And later that week I went to speak to a group of Year 11, 12 law politics students from a half a dozen schools. And I told them I learned something from Michael Kirby, on Monday when he gave a lecture. You always pick up something if your mind is tuned to that discipline of learning. Paul's distinction between a university giving you an access to a job versus a university giving you access to a career is on the one hand very obvious, but on the other hand so succinctly stated that it does crystallise all of those things. So for me, UWA helped me hone all of those skills, which in the end are about, here's a problem, how do you address the evidence, how do you try and deal with it scientifically or logically, and then having addressed all aspects of it, come to a decision or a judgment that you think best reflects what the outcome for the client or the state or the nation or the university or the bank should be.
Rebecca, you've just started your teaching career.
Yeah.
Where do you think your UWA teaching qualification will allow you to take your teaching career?
I guess at this stage I'm still loving the classroom and the number of opportunities that it brings. I know with the school that I'm at now, I'm on the back of the achievements that I had last year. I'll be going to New York soon this year, and then taking students to Greece for a classics and ancient history tour next year, and possibly India as well for what the school are involved in, which is they call World Challenge, to challenge the students, their leadership skills, and I guess their orienteering as well, work their way around India. But without the UWA degree, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't have had those opportunities because I wouldn't have had that connection with Shenton. I mean, a lot of people find their jobs through connections that they might make, and being from the country, that was completely alien to me. I had no connections here, and so UWA helped me to find those, and with the Learning Links connection that the university has with Shenton College, that was sort of a nice pathway for me. And I mean, I also did a practicum at Halse School, but the choice for me was always going to be public education, because I'm a very big proponent of public education, and that's sort of where I'd like my UWA experience and degree to take me to, is possibly into education policy, and to look at what is the future of education, and particularly public education, because I strongly believe that everybody should have the opportunity to learn, and the opportunity to make mistakes. And I think the UWA experience was very good. I never felt that I wasn't going to be supported, or I couldn't make a mistake and change my pathway. I mean, I took units in architecture, art, sports science, classics, history, law. I sort of did the whole gamut. And I never once felt that I was being directed somewhere I didn't want to go, and so I felt that the UWA experience enabled me to learn and to love learning, and to work out in my own time, which many students do, what I really wanted to do. And now that they've helped me find that love, I'd like to put back into education, whether that's still in the classroom or at the point where I don't still love going in on each 8 o'clock class on a Monday morning, then possibly into education policy.
Can I just pick up on, Rebecca, one of the things you said about the diversity of experience you had at uni here when you were doing your undergraduate degree. That diversity is, I think, very important. I spent a lot of time talking to major employers, and I've never yet encountered a major employer and major recruiter of UWA graduates who, or indeed of any university graduates, who says, you know, when recruiting engineering graduates, we'd like your graduates to know a bit more about this particular bit of engineering, or if they're recruiting accounting graduates, we'd like your graduates to know this a bit more about International Accounting Standard number 678. What they say is we assume, and indeed we know, that a graduate who comes out of UWA will be professionally trained in their discipline area. But what we're then looking for are the attributes that will enable us to take a graduate and have a really effective employee who can develop her or his career within this organisation. And what's the difference between knowing your discipline and doing well in that and being a really effective employee? It's about a whole range of other, what you might call soft skills. To be a really effective employee, you have to be good at communication. You have to be able to work in a team. No one works alone. You have to learn the skills of knowing when to speak and when to listen. You have to learn to accept constructive criticism, and even more difficult, to give criticism that's constructive rather than destructive. You have to be imaginative, but also focused in terms of getting the job done. Those are all the skills that employers are looking for. And with the degree structure we have here, we have designed it to ensure that if you are going to major in engineering or in accounting, you pick up a whole range of other skills and attributes and knowledge as you go through your undergraduate degree. All engineers need to be highly quantitative, but they've also got to be good at words. All history graduates will be good at words, but they need to have some structured analytical and quantitative abilities if they're going to perform well in their area of work. And something else we also recognise is that most people in their jobs are going to be working outside of Australia at some time, or at the very least working for an international company or organisation based here in Australia. So we try to get as much international experience as we can. UWA is Australia's leading university in terms of study abroad. About 22% now of undergraduates here have spent some time studying overseas by the time they graduate. Some take a year overseas, some a semester, and some on shorter study trips. And because this is one of the world's top 100 research universities, we have phenomenal links with equivalent universities around the world. So coming to UWA is a bit like then getting a gold pass to other universities around the world, where you can go and spend a semester or a year to study in your discipline area, but in a different environment. And again, that's something that employers look for, because it shows that you're prepared to challenge yourself, to step outside of your own comfort zone and try something a little bit different in a different environment. Large companies are asking their staff to do that all the time. They're setting up branch operations here and there, they're moving their staff around. So they're looking for that track record in terms of the graduates that they recruit.
I think what you mentioned there, I think about the flexibility and the ability to experience such a wide variety of units in a wide variety of disciplines is probably is one of the reasons why back when I started I did a double degree, because while being an engineer is fantastic, it does pigeonhole you into certain skills. And I think if there'd been the fantastic course structure that is now available, which has such a huge, allows for such a large amount of diversity, I would have loved it, having that ability to take on things like French, which I had to drop after I came out of high school, music and that sort of thing. I think that's probably one of the biggest advantages that the new course structure has within Australia.
I would like to just pick up on something that's been mentioned, and that is diversity. It's also about students being able to think for themselves. So I'll put my RBA hat on here. At the RBA, I mentioned earlier, it's very competitive to get into the RBA. So the first screening is against grades, and the minimum requirement to get into the RBA is a distinction average across course subjects. So that's the first screening. But then people have research skills that they've developed here from UWA, usually from the honours year or with higher degrees. Those skills help prepare for analysis, good critical analysis, because the last thing that an institution like the RBA wants to do is to employ people who will just second anything that management says. Management wants to be challenged on current economic policies, so you'll get something quite complex. The economy is incredibly complex with all these interlinkages. So the position on policy today can change very quickly tomorrow. So you want analysts, you want people to critically analyse the bank's position and be able to put something forward that might suggest a new path, but a logical, sensible path as well. So I can't put enough emphasis on those types of skills that employers are looking for, and it's certainly very apparent once you start interviewing, going through the interview process, and you can start screening people on that basis. And obviously UWA does it well, because there are many UWA graduates currently working at the Reserve Bank in Sydney.
Are there any questions in the audience?
Just a question for Rebecca. How did you find moving from a country area to Perth to study, and what sort of process did you go through in terms of finding somewhere to live and accessing services on campus?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, because I don't know if there are any country students in the audience, but it was a daunting I guess, option that I decided that I wanted to go to university. And I'm from Denmark, which is a small town on the south coast. There's not a lot of us that do sort of decide and go on to university, and especially now that UWA have a campus in Albany, that's an option for country students. But I decided to come to Perth, and I needed to take a year off because financially I just wasn't going to be able to afford to move to Perth without doing that. But I enjoyed that experience, so worked and travelled and earned enough money that I could support myself. But at the same time, I applied for a number of different scholarships, and I was on a rural scholarship at the university, which really, I mean, without that I wouldn't have been able to attend. And there are a number of different scholarships that I applied for and that are available to country students or to students at a particular disadvantage. Once I was at UWA, I lived for the first year at Trinity College, one of the university campuses, and I thoroughly enjoyed that experience, and being able to just roll out of bed and walk onto campus was a pretty big plus. So I did that for a year and then rented beyond that. But I mean, without the scholarships, it's something that I wouldn't have been able to do financially. But without the support structures that UWA have in place, I think I wouldn't have been able to complete my degrees, just because of the knowledge gap that unfortunately there is between different schools and different students when they leave Year 12. I joined up to the Uni Skills program that the university offers, and as a country student I was eligible to do that. It's also available for mature age students and I think international students, and there's a number of different I wouldn't say disadvantages, but I think that's what they highlight them as, that you could have to be part of that program. And it provides study groups, so I was involved in that as a student and then as a tutor later on, but also social and creating friendship groups. So they'd have barbecues down by Matilda Bay once a week and social get-togethers. They have an orientation week for new students at the start of each year, and being able to be involved in a program like that really helped me to work through that transition. And then also I was in a really wonderful position where I could give back and sign up and to be one of the Uni Skills helpers, and I knew what it felt like to be fresh and a little bit scared and nervous and lost on campus, and I could take on that role to help direct new students around and help with their transition. So there are a number of things, both financially and to support my education and social life at uni, that UWA had in place.
Any other questions from the audience?
There's a lot of other universities available to students who have just graduated from high school. What makes UWA different?
Well, UWA is the leading university in terms of its international connections, its significance, its positioning with employers. It sets the highest standards for its students and staff, both in terms of the standards on admission and the standards on exit from the university for graduates, and the standards we set for our staff in terms of research. I suppose I would say if you want to aim high, work hard and play hard, then this is a great university. If you have other ambitions and other goals, you need to look at what each university has on offer, and they are all different, and you need to delve into what each university has to offer to see whether it's right for you. And in terms of working out whether any particular university is right for you, you need to look inside yourself and say, what is it that I want out of my time as a university student? What do I want in terms of intellectual growth, personal growth and development? It's a key time for that. Building social networks, focusing on the subject of study. Are you interested in focusing on getting a specific but narrowly defined job? Are you interested in building, I suppose, the resources, the personal resources that will help you through a career? And I don't think anyone at age 17 or 18 or even age 27 or 28 knows what that career will be over the rest of their life, but it's about building the resources and capability to develop that career. And so different places are right for different people. And coming here, going to other university open days, getting as much information you can from the web, from school friends and others who have experience of the different universities is really, really important. The most important thing is that whatever decision you take it with the maximum amount of relevant information. Don't make important decisions in a casual way. Really work at them, because it will affect how you spend your next 3 years, and indeed will probably have an impact on the career that you develop over the rest of your life.
To add to that, UWA is unique within the country that we have probably the highest engagement from students within our social side. We have 114 different clubs, as I mentioned earlier, ones that represent students to the university and their faculty societies, which have up to 22 committee members. We have clubs that dedicate themselves to different niche areas, the Animal Welfare Society, the Anime Society, as I mentioned earlier. And I guess why that makes a big difference is because when you spend so much time on campus learning, you often need something to really aspire to that's outside of that academia, and to give your university experience a lot of balance. And I would say that the UWA student experience within that environment is the highest in Australia, and we have more students engaging with our student union than anywhere else, and it's shown. We have 4,500 students deciding who they want to run the student guild every year, compared to much bigger universities over east who have a larger number of students but only have 1,000 or 2,000 students getting involved and participating in that. So UWA is by far leading the charge in that area.
Can I also add that as an outsider looking in, I was impressed by the alumni presence here, which I mentioned a little earlier. And so while you have fun and have lots of different groups that you can interact with in different ways, those networks will become important later on down your career path. And there are some amazing leaders out there who were students at this university as well. So those networking opportunities, I don't think you should look at lightly or dismiss in any way. They're an important part of your life going forward. So that's something I've noticed. And I was part of the international accreditation for the university, and something else I noticed is that there are quite a few former students from this university who come back and give guest lectures or are involved in the university in some way, and that keeps everything relevant and up to date as well. So there are lots of academic benefits, of course, on the academic side, but the social side will lead to important networking opportunities for you as well.
We probably have time for one last question, if anyone has it.
As the panel has spoke and talked about how great this university is, and I think it'd be a small amount of people in Perth who would say that this isn't a great learning institution. what do you feel is the greatest challenge this university faces going towards the future?
Shall I? Oh, Stephen, you go.
Well, I think if you look at, when I came to university here, UWA was still the only university in Western Australia. And by the time I came back from studying overseas, we were then looking at 3, and now we've got 5 universities in Western Australia. So, firstly, there was a period where UWA was, inverted commas, a monopoly, and then was subject to competition and did very well in that competition. For a number of decades, the competition that UWA faces has not been with 3 or 4 or 5 other universities in Western Australia, but with the 40-odd universities throughout the country. Because all universities are now on the make for quality students to add to their intellectual and academic stock. So the first thing that the University of WA has had to do, like other universities, is to be competitive, to be a centre of excellence, and not to just assume that students will come here, but you've got to go out there and attract them. And as the Vice-Chancellor said, if you're a student these days thinking about where you go, arm yourself with all of the information about what the various universities and the faculties can provide and what you want to do. To me, the biggest challenge for UWA is we're currently going through a massive transformation in our region of economies and countries. Everyone sees the rise of China. Not enough people see the rise of the ASEAN economies combined. Not enough people see the rise of India. So the big challenge for UWA will be, in the next decade, 2 decades, as we get to the middle of this century, our competition won't be a university of excellence versus Australian universities. It'll be, how are we competing with an explosion of universities in China, in India, in Indonesia? How are we making ourselves relevant and attractive, not just to those students from those countries who might want to come here and study and research, but how attractive will we be and competitive will UWA be in setting the standards for our students who then want to go off as graduates or postgraduates and find a way for themselves academically or in a particular career or profession in one of the great expanding economies. Classic illustration to me is sometime between now and 2050, Perth and Western Australia will have a population of between 4 and 5 million. We've seen a massive population growth in the last decade. We've gone from a capital city of 1.2 million to a capital city of 2.2, and in 10 years' time will be 3.2. For someone who grew up in Perth as a country town, this is quite a large growth. And by the middle of the century, we'll have a city and a state of population critical mass. At the same time, Indonesia will go from a country of 300 million people to 400 million people. More importantly, it'll go to a country who's the 4th largest populated country in the world, but more importantly, the 4th largest economy. And over that period of time, generally somewhere in the 2030s, we'll have an economy that's bigger than Australia's. So how does Australia cope with that? And that's a micro challenge as well for the university. So I see, and the Vice-Chancellor has been leading the charge on this, how do we make sure that UWA continues to be a competitive place as a centre of excellence and opportunity in competition not just with other universities in Perth or in Australia, but universities throughout the world. And that won't just be UK and US, it'll be our own part of the world, the Indo-Pacific region.
And just to add, I would have given focused on exactly the same thing. The challenge is to leverage off all the things that are going for this university. We're in the same time zone here in Perth, of course, as Beijing, and in fact in the same time zone plus or minus an hour of 60% of the world's population. UWA is currently the #1 university in that part of the world, in that time zone. And the challenge and the opportunity, of course, given our geographic location and the significance of our research and our links into universities in China, Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on, is to build from the great foundation we have to really capitalise on that and to be seen globally as probably the most important university as a portal for the traditional Anglo American sort of North Atlantic world to connect into the very dynamic economies and the very dynamic intellectual environment that's now developing right across Southeast Asia.
Well, that's all we have time for today. I'd like you all to thank you all for coming and to put a round of applause for our panel members here.